Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. DDG94, back with another reaction video. Today, we're finna react to the best, excuse me, the best 90s Saturday morning cartoons and after school cartoons. I know I was supposed to live stream today, but I had some fuck shit happen to me yesterday. I was supposed to put a post up. I forgot to put a post up. Because by the time I had woke up, I almost overslept for what I needed to do today. So I'll just make a video about it on Monday, man. So fuck shit, bro. So fuck shit. Oh my God, bro. Fuck shit. But I'm cool though. I'm straight. Minor setback for a major comeback. Well, minor setback for a quick major comeback. So like that setback didn't set me back as much as they thought it was, as they thought it was, because your boy hopped right back on his feet within a couple of hours. But I had to handle a situation. I'll talk about it on Monday. I'll make a video about it on Monday. But yeah, I know I was supposed to live stream yesterday. We gonna still do the live stream. We gotta get the first live stream of 2025 out the way. We got to. We're gonna do it this Friday though. This Friday, we streaming. Okay? So make sure y'all there. Be there or be square. We are live streaming on Friday. Ain't no debates about that, my guys. So without further ado though, let's get right into it, shall we?
What's up, my comic comrades? So about 4 months ago, we did an episode on the greatest 80s Saturday morning and after school cartoons. And while the 80s is considered by many to be the golden era for Saturday mornings and after school cartoons, giving us classics like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
I wasn't born around this time, so I wouldn't know.
The Real Ghostbusters, G.I. Joe, and so many more, I think there's a case to be made that the 90s era of cartoons was just as good, if not.
The 90s era is better. I don't care what anybody say. The 90s era is better. The 80s era, it seemed like it was cool, but the 90s era just got too much heat, bruh. It's too much heat. Who's competing with all this? Look at what you see right here. Dexter's Laboratory, Rugrats, Looney Tunes, Angry Beavers, Animaniacs, Sonic the Hedgehog, Johnny Bravo, The Tick, Freakazoid, Spider-Man, X-Men, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Cow and Chicken, Hey Arnold. Fuck Pokemon, but Pokemon was a thing, so Pokemon, I guess. Goddamn, damn, I forgot the name of this goddamn show already. I forgot the name of the show. But Pinky and the Brain. Come on, bro. Pinky and the Brain. Come on, bro. Earthworm Jim. Come on, dog. Power Rangers. Come on, bro. The 90s is different, bro. It's different, bro. You're not competing with the 90s, bro. You're not. The 80s cannot compete with the 90s on any given day. Now, some people say that 90s can't compete with the 2000s. I would tell you that's a lie, because a lot of shit from the 90s transcended into the 2000s. So technically, if it wasn't for the 90s, a lot of shit from the 2000s wouldn't even still be hitting, bro. So let's be real. Let's be real for a second. I think the 90s was the best era for cartoons, period. But I digress. Anyways, though, without further ado, let's get back into this.
Not better. So put your Trapper Keeper away, press save on your Game Boy Color, clean up your Pogs, and grab some Dunkaroos and Surge, because we're gonna take a stroll through the 90s. Specifically to talk about the greatest 90s Saturday morning cartoons. Now, with that said, there are way too many cartoons that came out in the 90s to mention them all. So we're gonna stick to our absolute favorites, which is still going to be a pretty good chunk. We're also going to do this by year, starting with 1990. So first up, we have Bobby's World. This cartoon is one of the earliest memories I have of a cartoon series, and I still think one of the best cartoons that come out of the 90s. The series was created by Howie Mandel, even appeared in live action at the beginning of every episode, and also voiced Bobby and played Bobby's dad. The opening is ingrained in my head with Bobby riding his trike into his imagination with that 90s synth. The show is a great fun kids cartoon that follows the adventures of Bobby Generick, with us seeing the world through his eyes as a little boy with a big imagination. Moving along, since we're not spending too much time on each since there's a bunch to get through, we have Captain Planet and the Planeteers. This is the first superhero superhero cartoon I ever watched in the 90s as it kicked off the 90s. I was obsessed with Captain Planet. I had his action figure and I watched every single episode. I know I'm not the only one who remembers the classic line, "Let our powers combine. Earth, fire, wind, water, heart. With your powers combined, I am Captain Planet." I wanted one of those magic rings the kids in the show had so bad. The rings were created by Gaia, the spirit of Earth, and gifted them to 5 kids from all over the world, giving them the power of an element, and with their powers combined, they can create Captain Planet. It was a great show that had some educational value in the sense that it dealt with treating Earth kindly, not polluting it or hurting nature, the environment, or wildlife. As Captain Planet would say, he finds pollution solutions. So damn cheesy, but I ate it up as a kid. It was an environmentalist show through and through, and like many 90s cartoon intro themes, it was abusing. The concept of the show was introducing the next generation of Looney Tunes, the successors of Bugs, Daffy, and more. We follow characters like Buster Bunny, Babs Bunny, Plucky Duck, Hampton J. Pig, and more who attend Acme Looniversity to learn to become funny and carry on the legacy of the classic Looney Tune characters. The show kicked off the smart humor in the 90s for Warner Brothers, allowing kids and adults alike to enjoy the show. I loved the Looney Tunes growing up, and the Tiny Toons were some of my favorites. One of the best parts of the show was all the pop culture references and cameos. Anything Warner Brothers or Steven Spielberg was a part of during his career was on board. So we got cameos from Indiana Jones, Batman, Steven Spielberg himself, and more. The show is just all around great and still holds up to this day. Its vibe, tone, and humor is one of the greatest examples of what made 90s cartoons great. On a personal note, I remember having a plush Buster Bunny and several of the McDonald's Happy Meal toys. Those toys were great. But jumping to 1991, we have the Back to the Future animated series. This series was very short-lived, only getting 2 seasons, but it was my jam. The Back to the Future franchise is one of my favorite movie franchises of all time, so naturally as a kid, I was all about the animated series. Another reason I have such fond memories of this show is because I had all 4 of the McDonald's Happy Meal toys from it. The Doc and the DeLorean was one of my favorite toys, full stop, for a long time. You're going to quickly find out a lot of my favorite 90s cartoons also have ties to Happy Meal toys. Because back then McDonald's was goated with their toys, making dope Happy Meal toys from some of the biggest kid shows at the time. I would ask my parents to take me to McDonald's just to get specific toys from Happy Meals. But that cheeseburger and fries, it hit different back then. Anyway, I digress. As for the show itself, it was a direct sequel to the film trilogy, even co-created by Rob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who did the 3 films. The series even opened and closed with live action segments of Christopher Lloyd returning as Doc Brown. He would introduce the story of each episode and cap every episode with its moral. It's a perfect show of the 90s and stayed loyal to the films. Every episode followed Doc's family and Marty on various time-traveling adventures. They would visit different historical points, both in the future and past. And of course, the DeLorean and Doc's new inventions played major roles in every episode's story. The series focused on educational themes using history and science as part of the storytelling. It's a brilliant show based on one of the most successful movie franchises of all time and highly underrated. But continuing on, we have the terror that flaps in the night, the flea you cannot flick, the surprise in your cereal box, Darkwing Duck. I think we can all agree Darkwing Duck is amazing. It's one of the most quotable cartoons from the 90s. For instance, I am the moth that seeks your porch light. Let's get dangerous. It's so good. It aired on Disney Afternoon and Saturday mornings on ABC. If you were a kid that liked superheroes like me, Darkwing was an obvious favorite. Its theme song alone is iconic. DW, as we call him, was voiced by none other than voice acting royalty Jim Cummings. As for the show itself, it was a hilarious fun take on the vigilante superhero archetype, blending the noir detective elements of characters like the Shadow with the flair and gadgets of Batman, then mixing in some slapstick humor and giving him a great sidekick like Launchpad from
I didn't get into Darkwing Duck until Toon Disney. So basically like after his prime. Like after his prime, after Toon Disney's prime, I mean after Darkwing Duck's prime on ABC, Disney, Saturday 1, whatever you call that shit. Toon Disney is where I found out about Darkwing Duck, and I was hooked, bro. Hey, Toon Disney is still goated, bro.
DuckTales. He even had hilarious villains like Megavolt, Bushroot, Porter Jack, and Negaduck. Disney basically nailed everything on their 90s Disney Afternoon and Saturday morning lineup in true classic Disney fashion. But there was another kid network making big swings in the early 90s, and that of course is Nickelodeon. Obviously, we recently found out that behind the scenes at Nickelodeon things weren't so good to say the least, but let's stick to what we knew as kids for the sake of reminiscing. 2 of their all-time greats are Doug and Rugrats, but let's start with Doug. Doug was a simple simple, straightforward cartoon that became a huge hit because of its relatable slice of life storytelling. What made Doug so great was the fact that he was just an awkward, normal 11-year-old boy. He had a dog named Pork Chop, a best friend named Skeeter Valentine, had a crush on Patty Mayonnaise, even a bully named Roger Klotz. Doug Funny wasn't super popular, but also wasn't a complete outcast. He was just kind of there like most of us were. And it was great seeing him work through everyday problems like all of us. He was also a comic nerd like us, giving himself the alter ego of Quail Man that he would often use to work through his problems. Doug is just a relatable, fun character, especially if you were a kid around his age watching it. Also, Skeeter was the man. Honk honk. And we all had a Patty at our school, a pretty girl we wished was our girlfriend. The crazy thing is, Disney would do what Disney does and later acquire Doug, giving it a full feature film release, which I loved and saw in theaters. They even continue the series on the Disney Channel. Next up, we have more Nickelodeon royalty, and that, of course, is Rugrats. For a lot of people, this is the end-all be-all cartoon of the 90s, and you really can't blame them. All the cartoons I've mentioned thus far were really popular, but I feel Rugrats a little more so. I mean, Rugrats got 3 theatrical released films: the Rugrats movie in '98, Rugrats in Paris the movie in 2000, and Rugrats Go Wild in 2003. It's the only 90s cartoon that got a theatrical film trilogy. That should tell you everything you need to know. I don't have to break down Rugrats for you. We all should be familiar with the Rugrats, whether you're a 90s kid or...
The first 2 movies ago, that Thornberry crossover, it's hit or miss. I recently saw it because it's free on YouTube. I don't know if it's free on YouTube anymore, but all the Rugrats movies was free on YouTube. I watched all of them. I ain't gonna lie. That third one is I ain't gonna lie though. The MVP of that movie is Nigel Thornberry, hands down. But Nigel Thornberry has always been an MVP. Nigel Thornberry has always been an MVP. No matter what episode of Wild Thornberries he's on, or whether he in a crossover with the Rugrats. Smashing good show. Yeah. Smashing good. Shout out to the voice actor that played Nigel Thornberry. I forgot his name.
Or not, because that's how beloved this series was and is. The concept of the show was so simple, just follows a group of babies, Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil, their older bully Angelica, and also the counter to Angelica, Susie, who is protective of the babies, along with Tommy's dog Spike, and eventually his younger brother Dill and Chucky's stepsister Kimmy. The great thing about Rugrats is we get to see the world through the eyes of how a baby might see it, like going to the grocery store, going to the park, everyday things, seeing what they may be thinking and how they may perceive things is absolutely brilliant. The show is easily top 10 favorite 90s cartoons for me personally and still holds up. So much so, my 7-year-old and 4-year-old started watching it on Netflix and they love it. Next, we have my favorite animated series ever, not just from the 90s. Of course, I'm talking about 1992's Batman the Animated Series. If you know anything about me, you know I can go on and on with my love for this series and how it changed primetime animated storytelling in a massive way. One of the main things Batman the Animated Series is known for, and what put it on the map, so to speak, is its storytelling. How it didn't talk down to children, but instead found clever ways to explore mature themes that were still suitable for a younger audience. Giving us iconic episodes like Heart of Ice, which is a super mature, complex story of how Victor Von Freeze would do anything to get his wife back. This take on Mr. Freeze became so iconic, DC decided to make Mr. Freeze's animated origin his main continuity origin in the comic books as well, which still stands to this day. Or how about the complexity and tragedy of Harvey Dent's story in Two-Face Part 1 and 2? The series was constantly giving us peak storytelling, which was borderline unheard of in an afternoon or Saturday morning cartoon series at the time. Not to mention, there's almost countless elements of this series that ended up being mainstays in the main DC Batman continuity because of how good it was. Usually movies and TV pull from comics as it's the source material, but in this case, the comics were pulling from the show. That's how great it was. Then you add the stunning noir retro modern animation mixed with an amazing voice cast consisting of the likes of Kevin Conroy, who became known as the definitive voice of Batman, and Mark Hamill, who would become the definitive voice of the Joker. Of course, we also have the iconic opening theme song done by Shirley Walker that was a twist on Danny Elfman's iconic Tim Burton Batman theme. Again, that could go on, but for me, this is easily the #1 cartoon series of all time, not just the 90s. So with that praise out of the way, let's move on. Staying in the comic book animated animated series camp, 1992 would also give us another staple to 90s kids everywhere, and that, of course, is the utterly amazing, or should I say, astonishing X-Men the Animated Series. For the newer generation, this is what Disney Plus's X-Men 97 was based off. This series ran so X-Men 97 could also run. I know that's not how the saying goes, but I changed it because X-Men the Animated Series also ran. It did not walk. And X-Men 97 is just as good as its predecessor, although the OG X-Men the Animated Series from the 90s still has that extra special place in us 90s kids' hearts because this is what started it all, what made X-Men 97 possible. What made the series special is kind of what made Batman the Animated Series so special. It didn't talk down to its audience. It explored mature themes like acceptance and prejudice. It also adapted some of X-Men's most iconic comic book storylines like the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix saga, Days of Future Past, The Age of Apocalypse, and a ton more. For a lot of people, this is the series that made them like X-Men in the first place. You'd watch this on weekday afternoons or Saturday mornings on Fox Kids and then be like, I need more of this. So you take your butt to the comic book shop and buy some X-Men comics. Again, when you say X-Men to a big group of people, the imagery and stories from X-Men the Animated Series is what comes to their mind first, especially now with X-Men 97 being so good and doubling down on this version of the X-Men. Moving along, in 1993, we would get Animaniacs. This series was so good. Yakko, Wacko, and Dot are some of the best cartoon characters ever made, as well as Pinky and the Brain, Narf, or even Mindy. Okay, lady. Okay, I love you, bye-bye. How about Mr. Skullhead? Good idea. Bad idea. Then you even have the Good Pigeons. I could go on and on. The series was firing at a 10 at all times. People to this day will still sing Wacko's America song, which helped a lot of kids learn the states and capitals. So for all of the show's hijinks and slapstick comedy, it also had some educational value. The show had it all: slapstick, zany humor, tons of parodies, and musical numbers. It was so well done and diverse, having something for everyone, with both kids and adults loving the series. I mean, they would parody movies like Edward Scissorhands or Jurassic Park, or even have cameos from beloved Warner Brother characters like Batman. The series was so loved in the 90s, it got a reboot on Hulu a few years ago. The reboot wasn't as good as the original, but it was still fun, as it was nice to see Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, as well as Pinky and the Brain. My oldest daughter actually became obsessed with the original Animaniacs series in 2020. She watched the series all the way through like 3 different times that year. It was crazy. But jumping to the next series, we have Exo Squad. This was a short-lived series that only got 2 seasons, but a core memory from my childhood nonetheless. If you remember this series, it dealt with humanity expanding its reach to other planets in the 22nd century. In this future, Earth is part of a confederation with colonies on Venus and Mars. We also see that humans have created Neo-Sapiens, a race of genetically engineered beings who were made to be stronger to survive harsh work environments on Mars and Venus. But of course, the Neo-Sapiens are treated like second-class citizens, subjected to oppression by humans. This leads to the show dealing with mature themes like war, prejudice, and oppression. In a lot of ways, it is certainly one of the most serious in tone and darker children cartoons of the 90s, certainly ahead of its time. The vehicles were absolutely awesome. They were basically just small and giant mechs that they would pilot. Such a great show and toy line. Speaking of great 90s shows that also had amazing toy lines, we have Mighty Max. Mighty Max was an amazing cartoon series. It follows Mighty Max, a young boy named Max, who had a magical cap, the Cosmic Cap, that turns out to be an ancient artifact of immense power. The cap could open portals anywhere in the world, and of course he gets thrown into a bunch of adventures fighting supernatural and sci-fi threats that want to destroy the world. But he's not alone. He teams up with a bird-like sage who is a member of an ancient civilization, and Norman, a huge Viking warrior that's vowed to protect Max at all costs. I love the horror supernatural element of the show. It's one of the reasons I liked it so much, but also the toys were incredible. Mighty Max toys were essentially the boy version of Polly Pocket. They were entire play sets and figures you could fit in your pocket or backpack and take anywhere. I have very vivid memories of going to Toys R Us and my parents letting me pick out a Mighty Max set. My favorite was the Skull Dungeon playset that was essentially Frankenstein's laboratory and came with Frankenstein. It was pretty great. Next, we have one I know a lot of you forgot about, but I certainly did not, and that is Tales from the Crypt Keeper, the animated series. Much like its live-action counterpart, this was a horror anthology comedy series, but aimed towards kids. I loved horror since I was a kid, so this was right up my alley. There was nothing really else like this in animation form at the time. Every episode was a standalone horror story that dealt with kids facing off against curses, supernatural creatures, and anything scary. The stories usually ended with a cautionary or moral tale, and it was funny along the way, and The Crypt Keeper was amazing. Whenever someone brings up Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps, I'm like, yeah, those 2 series are phenomenal, but like Tales from the Crypt Keeper, the animated series as well. Jumping to 1994, we have the original Monsters, Inc., and that is Real Monsters. I say the original Monsters, Inc. because the plot of Real Monsters revolves around a group of 3 monster students, Incus, Oblina, and Crumb, who are training at a monster academy to become professional scarers. And get this, their whole goal is to frighten humans collecting their scares, but instead of powering their city, it's to contribute to their grades. If you never put 2 and 2 together, I'm blowing your mind right now. Real Monsters was the original Monsters, Inc. Nonetheless, it was a fantastic series, one of my favorites Nickelodeon ever put out, and their headmaster, the Grumble, who wore heels and Joker-like lipstick, was a ticking time bomb. You never knew what he was gonna do. Marvel would also give us an animated series in 1994, and that, of course, is Fantastic Four, the animated series. As many of you know, I'm the comic book guy, so any animated show that was comic book related, I was all over as a kid, and I love me some Marvel's First Family, so this show was it for me. I mean, the fact that this show had Silver Surfer and Galactus alone made this a favorite, but then Doctor Doom was in the series, which obviously because he's the arch enemy of the Fantastic Four, but nonetheless, seeing Doctor Doom was epic. The series even had deep pulls like Frankie Ray Nova, Herald of Galactus. Next up, we have a lot of people's favorite animated series from the 90s, and that, of course, is Disney's Gargoyles. The series explored complex, dark storytelling with mature themes in a gothic atmosphere, making it stand out in the 90s, much like Batman the Animated Series. It's kind of crazy to me that the series hasn't been revised. I know that the story is being continued in comic form right now, which is great, but the fact that they haven't given it a continuation series is kind of shocking since Disney is all about that stuff and currently doing it very successfully with X-Men 97. Nonetheless, this is easily one of the highlights of the decade. I actually have a Goliath action figure on my desk. That's how much I love the series. The show for me is like the Marvel Universe meets Game of Thrones and in a weird way meets Gotham City. It just took so many different elements of things kids and adults loved and gave us this amalgamation that became Gargoyles. Its sophisticated storytelling, character development, and iconic characters is what made this series a cult classic.
Not gonna lie, once again, this is one of them shows I didn't see in its prime. But when it went to Toon Disney, that motherfucker was hitting. That motherfucker was hitting.
I could spend a lot of time talking about Gargoyles, but there's still many shows to talk about, so let's move on. Next up, we have Iron Man, the animated series. Though not as good as X-Men, the animated series, or some of the other series from Marvel, it still holds a soft spot in my heart. Not only did we get to see our favorite armored Avenger in action, but we saw him team up with his buddy War Machine and fight characters like the Mandarin, MODOK, and Fin Fang Foom. Not to mention, he would team up with Julia Carpenter, Spider-Woman, Hawkeye, and even the freaking Scarlet Witch to help him combat Mandarin's magic. But let me tell you something, Marvel's next animated series from the 90s went on to become one of the most talked about animated series of all time, comic book fan or not, and that, of course, is Spider-Man, the animated series. This series is so damn good, it's not even funny. It aired on Fox Kids, and for me, is one of the best interpretations of Spider-Man to date, much like Batman, the animated series, and X-Men, the animated series. This is people's definitive version of Spider-Man. It was so good and loved by fans so much, there is talks of Disney bringing it back, much like they did with X-Men 97. Giving us Spider-Man 98, the series. A sequel to the...
They got to, bro. They gotta give us this back because this left off on a cliffhanger, bro. We gotta get this story told. We gotta get this story told. This movie, this show was left on a cliffhanger, bro. They gotta do it. If you're doing it for X-Men 97, do it for this one too.
The iconic 90s one. I say it all the time, but this series was just so goated. And it's what gave us the original Spider-Verse. During the season finale in the Spidey Wars arc, they introduced the idea of Spider-Man from across the Spider-Verse, like Armored Spider-Man, the Scarlet Spider, Doc Ock Spider-Man, and more. So this series gave us the Spider-Verse before the Miles Morales movies, and even before the comic books, the real OG. Much like Batman the Animated Series, the influence of Spider-Man the Animated Series can be felt in the comics and even Spider-Man's live-action movies. Hell, the introduction of Dr. Octavius being a mentor to Peter initially was introduced in this series, something that Sam Raimi would go on to use in even the popular Sony Spider-Man video games. I just hope that the rumors are true and that Disney is indeed going to make a Spider-Man 98 series, because if they nail it like they did X-Men 97, it would be one of the best animated comic book series of all time. But that brings us out of 1994 and into 1995, where I'm only going to talk about one series from that year, but a great one, and that is Freakazoid. Freakazoid was an original superhero comedic series created by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, the men behind Batman the Animated Series, which explains why the show was so good. Freakazoid was an average teenager who was introverted and kind of a computer geek, but one day a computer glitch gave him superpowers such as super strength, speed, and fourth wall breaking, turning him into Freakazoid. What's so good about Freakazoid is that he's basically a satire take on superheroes and pop culture in general. He uses slapstick humor and meta commentary to create an amazing character that has gotten a massive cult following. In a lot of ways, Freakazoid is like a more crazy version of Deadpool. It's kind of weird to me that we haven't gotten anything from him since the 90s. This was an extremely popular show, even though it was short-lived. It has a die-hard fan base, me being part of it. All I know is this is one of the shows I was most excited to watch as a kid. I still love it to this day. He is a crazy, hilarious, fourth wall breaking, eccentric superhero with unpredictable abilities. He can do things that are absolutely absurd, and it's awesome. We even see him doing stuff like making fun of superhero tropes and going to conventions. But jumping to the next year, 1996, we have Superman the Animated Series. This series is loved, but I feel doesn't get talked about enough. It is easily one of the best comic book animated series of all time, a perfect counterpart to Batman the Animated Series. The two characters would even cross over, giving us the iconic World's Finest arc, where both Batman and Superman have to fight their arch enemies Joker and Lex Luthor together. It was great. I have a very vivid memory watching the premiere episode for Superman the Animated Series during the weekday at prime time. The show was part of the DC Animated Universe, aka the DCAU, having cameos of other DC characters like The Flash, Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, Orion, Mr. Miracle, and more. The series was a goldmine for us fans of the DC Universe. Moving along, we have Beast Wars Transformers. Let me tell you something about Beast Wars. It's my personal favorite Transformers cartoon of all time. The story is utterly amazing. The characters are utterly amazing. Everything about this show is amazing, but also at the time the show was made, it was groundbreaking, giving us Pixar
I don't remember this show. I don't.
style animation, which is commonplace now, but back then it was not. So it was also kind of like an event watching this, as you felt like you were watching a show from the future. Me and my dad used to watch this show together all the time because I remember him loving the animation and story just like me. Plus, Optimus Primal is the GOAT, and T-Rex Megatron is where it's at. I mean, just think about that. A T-Rex that transforms into an evil robot. That's every little boy's dream. Continuing to move along a little quicker to get through as many as possible, we have Dexter's Laboratory. Like many of the shows I mentioned, this is still one of my favorite TV shows to this day. It holds up phenomenally too. You have this little boy genius who has this crazy secret lab in his house, and somehow his parents aren't aware of it, but his ditzy sister is. So great. The show is very unique and hilarious. I feel it's one of the most iconic cartoons of all time. Dee Dee, get out of my laboratory. And the fact that he had an accent, but no one else in his family did, just made it that much better. It didn't make any sense, but it made all the sense in the world. I have so many memories tied to all these series, and one of my memories with Dexter's Laboratory is watching it late at night in like marathons, because Cartoon Network would play a bunch of Dexter's Lab episodes back to back late at night for some reason, and I just remember sitting up watching them until I fell asleep. Moving along, we have the Incredible Hulk animated series. Much like the other comic book cartoons I mentioned, this was great for comic nerds because I got to see the character as I read in the comic books come to life in my living room. Because not only did we get to see the Hulk smash with Thunderbolt Ross going after him, but also She-Hulk Jennifer Walters was a big part of the series, and I had a massive crush on her. I don't even care. You all know. If you watch the series, you know. But also, Doctor Doom was in the series, the Leader, Abomination, and so many other great Marvel characters. Now, here's a deep cut. Mortal Kombat, Defenders of the Realm. I've said it numerous times, MK is my favorite fighting game of all time. I'm a huge MK fan, and I absolutely love the live action movies from the 90s. Yes, Annihilation is horrible, but I still love it. So when the Mortal Kombat craze was getting nuts in the 90s, we got Mortal Kombat, the animated series, aka Defenders of the Realm, which aired on the USA Network, at least in South Florida. And I was obsessed, especially when Scorpion was in an episode. Scorpion is my dude. The design of his face mask in the show was great. It was very reminiscent of a skull, and it looked just badass. I actually need to see where I could stream this series because I gotta rewatch it. In 1997, we would get Disney's Recess, which just dealt with kids in elementary school, specifically what they would do during recess. It's one of those series that was kind of just relatable, being a 10 or 12-year-old kid, seeing other 10 or 12-year-old kids doing things at recess you wish you could do. Super simple concept, but great characters, fun stories, one of my all-time favorites. Now, of course, I also have to mention a ladies' man who's not so much a ladies' man, and that is Johnny freaking Bravo. The fact that he's like this kind of ditzy muscle man who's always trying to impress ladies, but it always backfires due to his his ego and poor judgment made for a hilarious cartoon series. This series is like so many other greats in the 90s, proof that you just need a cool concept for a character, and then the show just writes itself. Johnny Bravo certainly became a cartoon icon in the 90s, and it's not hard to see why. 1997 would also give us the new Batman adventures, but it was just a continuation of Batman the Animated Series, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. Just know it's goated because, again, it's more Batman the Animated Series. However, I do want to add that the redesigns for the new Batman adventures were phenomenal. I loved what Bruce Timm did to the new bat suit, giving us the black and gray detective suit, and even the redesigns for his villains and everyone else. He also got a new Batmobile, which was dope. But moving along, 1998 gave us Powerpuff Girls, who are still amazing and loved.
I watched it, but I was like, this is a girly show. I can't be watching girly shows like that.
So much so, they got an updated series like a few years ago. They are a trio of superheroes created by the professor who creates perfect little girls by mixing sugar and spice and everything nice. However, when Chemical X is mixed into it, we get the Powerpuff Girls. Of course, we got Blossom, the leader, Bubbles, the sweet-natured, gentle one, and Buttercup, the tough tomboy of the group. Being a fan of superheroes, I was completely sold on the show from the jump, but with the mix of humor, action, and heart, it made for one of the best series ever. Not only were the Powerpuff Girls awesome, so were their villains. Dude, Mojo Jojo, the arch nemesis, a highly intelligent chimpanzee who is always plotting and scheming. It's great. The gang Green Gang, a group of delinquent teens with green skin who cause all sorts of crime in Townsville. Or how about the hillbilly character with super strength, Fuzzy freaking Lumpkins. But easily, the most memorable villain for the Powerpuff Girls is him. The devil-like villain with crab hands, black heel boots, and an eerie voice. He always creeped me out as a kid and still kind of does. Like, what the hell, man? You know the creators were like, oh, we're gonna creep some kids out with this and it's gonna be amazing. But this, friends, brings us to the last year of the 90s, which gave us one of the most beloved cartoons of all time, still to this day going strong, and that is mother freaking SpongeBob SquarePants. Do I really need to elaborate on SpongeBob SquarePants? We all know how amazing SpongeBob SquarePants is. SpongeBob has borderline reached Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse fame. SpongeBob is amazing. Everything about it. Patrick, Mr. Krabs, Squidward, Gary, just all of it. It's easily one of the funniest cartoons ever created. I'm gonna leave it at that. But the last animated series from the 90s we're gonna talk about is Batman Beyond. Batman Beyond is one of the greatest things to happen to the Batman mythos. It's such a great concept and probably the best handing off of the torch I've seen for a superhero. The storytelling, of course, was top-notch, much like Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series. Not to mention, they knocked the design for the Batsuit out of the park.
The most underrated series ever. The most underrated series ever. This series is so underrated, bro.
All black bat suit with a bright red bat and retractable red glider wings, phenomenal. There's also a good chunk of you, I'm sure, that like Batman Beyond more than Batman the Animated Series, and I can't even argue that. I totally get it. For me, it's still Batman the Animated Series, but this is super close. With all that said, let's do some honorable mentions, shall we? Because there's a ton of great series that deserve it, such as Tailspin, The Adventures of Tintin, The Addams Family Animated Series, Goof Troop. Oh my god, I love Goof Troop. Rocko's Modern Life, Bump in the Night, Creepy Crawlers, Life with Louie, The Magic School Bus, Ace Ventura the Animated Series, The Mask Animated Series, Action League Now, that show was goated, Mighty Ducks the Animated Series, Extreme Ghostbusters, Men in Black the Animated Series, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, which I wasn't allowed to watch as a kid, but I did as a teenager, The Wild Thornberrys, Rocket Power, and Spider-Man Unlimited, goated, just to name a few. That was a crap ton. But in any case, this is just our list. We want to know what yours is, so let us know down in the comment section. Also,
alrighty, man, that's just gonna about do it for this one. Some of the best Saturday morning cartoons you could get, man. Saturday morning after school cartoons you could get in the 90s or early 2000s, man. What they talking about, man? Y'all don't know, man. Y'all wasn't. See, y'all little niggas think y'all got it good today because y'all got these streaming websites and whatnot. They ain't even giving y'all nothing good. Like nigga, cable TV will always be king, bro, because it gave us some of the most goated shit. The most goated shit came from cable TV. This shit y'all getting off these streaming sites, it ain't hitting like the old days, bro. It's not. But anyways, though, that's just gonna about do it for this one. I will see you all in the next video. Till then, peace out.